Hey guys, tonight we drift into the past, into a land carved by mountains, shadowed by war, and sharpened by steel. It is here that your story begins. Not as a legend, not as a hero, but as a cry in the cold air of Harima province. Born into a world where honor was as fragile as paper, and life was traded at the edge of a blade. You are Miyamoto Musashi, though you don't yet know the name, and this is your life. A life that will one day echo through the ages, through ink and steel and silence. The year is 1584, and Japan is no peaceful cradle for a newborn. It is a land fractured, where lords plot and armies clash, where the ground itself seems to tremble under the boots of marching men. Historians would one day call it the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period, a time when brother turned against brother, and peace was a memory few dared to speak aloud. But to you, to the squirming child wrapped in coarse cloth beneath a leaky roof, it is simply the only world you've ever known. Your first cradle is not a silk-covered bassinet, but a pile of worn straw. No wet nurse sings to you. Instead, the lullaby of your childhood is the hiss of wind slipping through wooden slats, the distant shout of warriors training in a nearby field, and the steady heartbeat of a home that has long since forgotten the word gentle. Your father, Shinmen Munisai, is a man who carries steel not just on his hip, but in his gaze, in his breath, in every motion. He is no poet, no dreamer. He is a swordsman, disciplined, harsh, and carved from the same cold stone that he expects you to sharpen yourself against. He does not see a sun. He sees a weapon, one still untempered, still soft, but with the potential to cut through fate itself. There are no kisses on the forehead, no lessons in kindness. Your education begins with splinters and bruises, with wooden blades and calloused hands. When other children are learning to recite verses or pluck blossoms from spring trees, you are taught how to stand with balance, how to watch an opponent's breath, how to fall without fear. Your toys are sticks fashioned into swords. Your games are duels against shadows, and yet you are not quiet, you are not obedient. There is something unruly in you, a spark that refuses to bow. You do not fit into the neat boxes that village elders love to speak of, the respectful child, the disciplined student. No, you are mud-streaked, wild-eyed, a creature of motion and instinct. Where others see danger, you see opportunity. Where others flinch, you charge. The villagers begin to whisper, "That boy," the one who never cries when he bleeds, who looks at grown men with a stare too old for his face. Some fear you, others dismiss you. But even they, in their most private thoughts, sense that something unusual is growing inside the child who never blinks at pain. And they're right. Because the world is not done sharpening you yet. Your first true taste of what you are becoming arrives before your voice has even settled into manhood. 13 years old, an age when most boys are clumsy with fishing poles and terrified of their own shadows. But not you. While others are still trying to fit into their father's sandals, you're preparing to face death head-on. It begins when a wandering samurai, an arrogant duelist from a nearby school, rolls into your village. He is armored not just in cloth and blade, but in ego. He expects a challenge from another master, not a boy with dirt under his nails and a stick for a sword. And so, he laughs. And that is his first mistake. You don't wait for permission. You don't bow or give speeches or follow ceremony. You strike, fast, brutal, and with all the savage rhythm of a storm hitting the earth. Before the villagers can gasp, the man is down. Groaning, bleeding, beaten by a barefoot boy who has never stepped inside a dojo. The whispers return, louder this time. Musashi. The name rolls like thunder. Your father watches, unmoving, his expression unreadable. Perhaps he is proud, perhaps he is afraid, perhaps he sees what he's created, and wonders if he's forged something even he cannot command. But for you, there is no confusion. No guilt, no doubt. You know now, with absolute certainty, what you are. Not a farmer, not a servant, not a boy who will grow old planting rice and praying for rain. You were born to fight, to roam, to carve your name not into paper, but into the bones of history. And that, as the wind shifts and the first light of dawn slices the hills, is where your journey begins. You leave home at 15. No feast, no farewell, no hand lingering on your shoulder to wish you luck. Only the silence of a dawn that feels colder than most, and the weight of a sword on your back. The world waits beyond the edges of Miyamoto village. Wild, vast, and uncaring. Most boys would hesitate, would clutch tightly to whatever safety they could find. But not you. You walk away without looking back. You are now a ronin, a masterless samurai. But even that title barely fits. A ronin, after all, is still part of a system, even if cast out of it. You refuse the system altogether. No lord to kneel before, no house to bear your name. You are a storm without an anchor, a sword that answers to no call but its own. The roads you travel are not paved. They twist through mountains and rice paddies, through forests thick with moss and memory. You sleep beneath trees, eat whatever your hands can catch or steal. Some days, rice and miso. Others, bark and rain. You become thinner, hungrier, but never weaker. Your body adapts to the cold. Your mind sharpens in solitude. Every mile peels away the boy you were. In each village, you do the same. You seek out the nearest dojo, the most confident swordsman, the proudest pupil. You challenge them, and you fight. Sometimes with a blade, sometimes with a stick, sometimes with nothing but your fists. Win or lose, though you rarely lose, you walk away, having learned something. A new angle, a new flaw to exploit, a new rhythm of breath to recognize. Every duel is a lesson, every bruise a page in the book you're slowly writing in your bones. You're not interested in honorifics or admiration. When they curse you as uncouth, when they sneer at your appearance, your ragged clothes, your unwashed hair, your sandals worn through at the toes, you let them. Because you know what they do not, that battles are not won with polished armor or perfect posture. They are won by the one who breathes slower in chaos, who notices the tremble in an enemy's fingers before a strike, who knows that a moment of doubt is more deadly than a sharpened blade. You do not duel to humiliate, but humiliation follows you like a shadow. Men you defeat refuse to speak your name. Dojos close their gates to you. Rumors blossom in your wake like wildfire. A beast who fights like a ghost, a boy who eats fire and drinks fear. It makes the challenges come faster, sometimes honorable, sometimes not. You welcome them all. You begin to understand that your true weapon isn't the sword in your hand. It's the mind that guides it. While others focus on technique, on lineage, on tradition, you study people, how they move when they lie, how they breathe when they're afraid, how pride makes them predictable, how anger narrows their vision. You learn to read intent before it becomes action, and then, one day, the sword in your left hand feels as natural as the one in your right. It begins with an idea. Why wield one blade when you have two hands? No master teaches you. No scroll outlines the steps. You teach yourself in the wilderness, under trees that bear witness to your struggle. At first, it's chaos. Your arms rebel, your balance falters. You strike yourself more often than any imagined opponent, but slowly, the rhythm emerges. One hand parries, one hand strikes. Both move as one, like twin wolves circling prey. Your style evolves into something no one has seen before. Nitin Ichiryu, the two heavens as one. With this, you become not just unorthodox. You become unknowable. The samurai who still cling to the old ways don't know what to make of you. You dress like a wanderer, fight like a demon, and speak with the calm certainty of someone who has stared into the void and found it lacking. You are a contradiction, barbaric in appearance, surgical in precision. They call you dishonorable. You call them dead. You are no longer just a boy with a blade. You are becoming something else entirely, a force that moves through the world like weather, and the world, for all its pride, cannot stop you. One name begins to rise among the rest, the Yoshioka school. Respected, refined, renowned. They are not just a dojo, but an institution, the pride of Kyoto itself. A challenge to them is a challenge to tradition, to hierarchy, to the very idea of what it means to be samurai. So, naturally, you go to them. Kyoto rises before you like a fortress, carved from silk and pride. This is not a land of wandering swordsmen and scrappy duels in dusty courtyards. This is the heart of the old world, of lineage, of reputation, of rules. And standing tall among its polished stones and paper-walled dojos is the Yoshioka school. To challenge them is to spit in the face of centuries. But that, of course, has never stopped you before. You enter the city as you always do, unannounced, unpolished, and unmistakable. Your clothes are frayed, your feet calloused, and your hair more windstorm than hairstyle. The guards at the gate barely glance your way. You're just another Ronin, after all. But by the time the sun sets, the city will be whispering your name. You walk straight into the lion's den. Yoshioka Seijuro, head of the school, is everything you're not. Clean, respected, well-spoken. He sits atop a school with dozens of students and the favor of noble lords. His blade is revered, his name carved into the bones of the city. He looks at you like one might look at a beggar asking for a seat at a royal banquet. You challenge him anyway. The duel is set. Formal, public. Word spreads like wildfire. A filthy Ronin dares to strike at the core of Kyoto's honor. Nobles clutch their robes. Swordsmen polish their blades. Bets are placed in secret and loud voices argue in smoky inns. But you don't care about the noise. You wait with stillness in your bones. When the moment comes, you waste no time with ceremony. The first strike is yours. Clean, relentless. Seijuro falls. Kyoto gasps. No gloating, no bow. You leave as you came, your cloak snapping in the wind like the aftershock of a thunderclap. But you know what you've done. You haven't just defeated a man, you've cracked the pillars of tradition, and they will not forgive you for it. They send his brother next. Yoshioka Denshichiro is taller, broader, angrier. Where Seijuro was composed, Denshichiro is a storm. He charges into the next duel with the fury of a man who isn't just trying to win, he's trying to erase you from memory. You stay calm. You've studied rage. Rage is clumsy. He falls too. The Yoshioka's pride is in tatters now, and pride is a dangerous thing when wounded. They don't challenge you a third time. Not properly. They set a trap instead. The next duel is a farce before it even begins. You're meant to face a boy. Yoshioka Matashichiro, barely more than a teenager, a figurehead propped up by the remnants of a shattered dynasty. But the real threat waits in the shadows. Dozens of blades, cloaked in darkness, waiting to strike as one. But you already know. You arrive early, hours before the trap is sprung. The sky is still brushing the ground with mist when you find the boy. He barely has time to cry out. One clean strike ends it. Before the swords hidden in the trees can react, you vanish like smoke from a campfire, disappearing into Kyoto's alleys before a single trap can spring. When the dust settles, the Yoshioka name lies broken. The city stares at the ruins, stunned. And you, the boy with the wooden sword, the wild hair, the eyes that never blink. You keep walking. Because there is nothing left for you here. The legend grows teeth. You're no longer just a swordsman. You are a ghost, a myth, a warning passed down from father to son. They say you fight like a demon, that no blade can touch you. that you can see death before it arrives and strike before breath can fill the lungs. And the worst part, they're not wrong. You roam the countryside like a wandering storm, unbound and untouchable. The roads become your only companion, the wind your lullaby, the moon your lantern. You eat when there's food, sleep where there's shelter, and fight when someone foolish enough mistakes you for an easy victory. Each new town is a test, each face a potential opponent. But more and more, it isn't about the duels anymore. It's about what those duels reveal. You no longer swing a sword for survival. You swing to learn. You observe how fear creeps into a man's breath, how arrogance hurries a strike, how hesitation kills more surely than any blade. Your mind sharpens faster than your steel. With every victory, the noise of the world fades, and something quieter begins to speak inside you, a voice that asks not just how to win, but why to fight at all. Most men of your station, ronin, warriors without lords, eventually find a master. They trade freedom for comfort, loyalty for purpose. But you refuse. You have seen what lies behind the curtain of prestige. Politics, compromise, false honor polished until it gleams. No castle can hold you. No lord can leash you. Gold means nothing when your soul would rust inside its cage. They try, of course. Lords send messengers with promises. They offer swords forged in the capital, horses with bloodlines more noble than their owners, lands ripe with rice and river fish. Some even offer daughters. But you are not flattered. You are insulted. They see your power, but not your purpose. You bow once, out of politeness, and walk away. The wilderness becomes your temple. Trees don't lie, rivers don't flatter. The silence of mountains teaches you more than the empty praise of courts ever could. You train every day, as if your greatest duel is still waiting just over the next hill. You practice not just with steel, but with everything your hands can grasp. A broken branch, a length of bamboo, a wooden oar. For you, a weapon is merely a thought made solid. And so, legends bloom behind your footsteps like wildflowers in your wake. They say you once defeated a swordsman with a boat paddle, that you crushed a dojo's pride using only a tree limb, that you challenged 3 warriors at once and beat them without drawing blood. Some of the stories are true, some are not. You no longer care which is which. You are no longer just a duelist. You are becoming something else. With each encounter, you grow less interested in triumph and more obsessed with transformation. Each opponent is a mirror, a reflection of who you were, who you could be, who you must surpass. And each shattered mirror leaves you clearer, more focused, more alone. You sleep beside rivers. You train in the snow. You carve your name into the wind, never leaving it in ink or stone. Your clothes hang in tatters. Your sandals dissolve with each mile. Yet you walk taller than emperors, because no one owns you, not even your past. You begin to glimpse something on the horizon, not another foe, but a different kind of mastery, one that cannot be won in duels, one that cannot be stolen by the stroke of a sword. It flickers just beyond reach, like the sun behind morning fog, and though you cannot name it, you know it's what you've been chasing all along, and still, you walk. There is a quiet shift inside you. It begins not with blood, but with ink. After years spent slicing through the world, you begin to wonder what it means to shape it instead. Your fingers, once so skilled at wielding death, now explore brushes and carving knives. At first, the results are pitiful. Calligraphy that looks like wind-wrecked banners, paintings that bleed too dark or too soft. But you persist, because you understand better than most that mastery does not arrive in fanfare. It arrives in repetition, in solitude, in silence. You begin to see the sword in every brush stroke, the same rhythm, the same breath. Movement becomes stillness, and stillness becomes motion again. You carve wood, not into weapons, but into forms, cranes with bent wings, monks lost in thought, warriors frozen at the edge of battle. You pour your soul into the grain and watch it look back at you, mute but knowing. Your peers whisper, "Has Musashi gone soft?" The man who crushed dojos and dismantled dynasties now paints flowers and carves the faces of ghosts. But they don't understand, because they never did. You haven't abandoned the path of the warrior. You've walked so far down it that the trail has changed shape beneath your feet. What began with duels now bleeds into poetry, into tea, into breath. You study Zen, not from priests but from the wind through pine, from the sound of a river when it forgets you're listening, from the stillness between raindrops. You meditate under waterfalls. You fast until the ache becomes music. You test the limits of what it means to be alive, not just with the body, but with the mind. People come looking for you still. Some want fame, others revenge. A few answers. You give them only what they earn. Sometimes a duel, sometimes a lesson. Sometimes a silence so complete that they leave with more than they knew they were missing. But inside, the old hunger has faded. Not because you are tired, your sword arm still moves like lightning through smoke, but because you've begun to understand. The truest duels are not fought on the battlefield. They are fought in the heart, in the quiet moments when no one watches. And then, as the seasons pass, as your hair grays at the edges and your walk slows by a fraction, you feel it. A pull. Not toward another opponent. Not toward another town, but toward a cave. A place so empty that even your shadow feels muted. A place where nothing exists to distract you. Nothing to battle, nothing to conquer. Reigando, the spirit rock cave. You enter alone. Not as a warrior, not as a legend, but as a student once more. Inside the stone belly of Reigando, the wind speaks a different language. It moves with slow, deliberate grace, humming through the cracks like a monk chanting beneath his breath. Here, there are no enemies, no pupils, no lords to impress. There is only the drip of water, the shifting of light across rough walls, and the echo of your own breathing. You bring little with you. A brush, a few scrolls, a body grown lean from wandering, and a mind honed to a terrifying edge. Your swords stay by your side, but they rest now, not from rust or fear, but from peace. They are witnesses, not tools. Silent companions to a man who no longer needs them to feel powerful. This cave is not a retreat. It is a forge, not of steel, of self. Here you begin to write. Not tales of conquest, not boastful retellings of your victories. You've always had contempt for empty pride. What spills from your brush is something else entirely. The collected knowledge of a lifetime of war, distilled into clear, merciless truth. No frills, no ceremony. Just what is real. The Book of 5 Rings. It is not a diary. It is a blade carved from thought. A guide for warriors, yes, but deeper still, a guide for anyone who seeks to understand conflict, movement, life. You divide it as the world divides itself, into 5 scrolls, each bearing the spirit of an element. Earth teaches grounding, where to place your feet, how to see the shape of the battlefield before the first blade swings. Water teaches adaptability, the art of flowing, of shifting, of seeing not just the obstacle, but the space around it. Fire teaches timing, when to strike, how to strike, and what part of the soul must ignite when the moment comes. Wind teaches perception, the way others move, the way they think, how to read their choices before they make them. And void. Void is the silence between all things, the place beyond technique, the space where the self dissolves and mastery lives. Not as something you possess, but something you become. You write in a language as stripped down as your life. No need for flourishes. Truth does not require decoration. You know that many will misunderstand, that most will skim the surface and pretend they've tasted the depths. But that's fine. You write not for the many. You write for the few, those who will walk the path as you did, with open eyes and bleeding feet. And when the final line is inked, you set down the brush, your hand trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of having said all that mattered. Outside the cave, the seasons turn. The mountains do not care. The rivers do not pause. But something inside you shifts again, subtly, profoundly. You have spent your whole life learning how to fight. Now, for the first time, you prepare to learn how to die. You feel it before it announces itself. A quiet unraveling in the marrow, a thinning of the thread that ties your breath to the world. Death does not arrive as a stranger. It has walked beside you for decades, across rivers, over fields of corpses, under the eaves of ruined temples. But now, for the first time, it stops and turns to face you, and you do not flinch. You do not beg for more time. You do not search for doctors, or priests or alibis against fate. You have lived honestly. You have made your peace not with gods or kings, but with yourself. There is no greater victory than that. You choose your end with the same deliberation you chose your path. Not in battle, not in spectacle, but in silence. You dress yourself in clean, simple robes. Nothing ostentatious, nothing to distract. Not because you are humble, but because you are finished. The sword rests at your side, untouched. Not as a threat, but as a witness. You sit cross-legged on the stone floor of the cave, one hand on your long blade, the other on your short. You close your eyes, not to retreat, but to see more clearly. The breath slows, the wind brushes your cheek like a last farewell, and then stillness. Not a struggle, not a gasp, just stillness. Complete, serene, final. You die the way you lived, with intention, with clarity, with no need for approval or ceremony or myth. Outside the cave, your students gather. They do not wail, they do not speak. They understand what has passed, not the death of a man, but the closing of a chapter that no one else could have written. The swords that once shaped nations now lie in dust. The hands that once ended dynasties now rest. And in that cold cave, that humble, nameless shelter in the mountain's ribs, something remains. Not the body, not even the legend, but the presence, the silence, the lesson. The news spreads slowly at first, like smoke curling from the mouth of a cave. Musashi is gone. The words feel impossible to say. Gone? How does a mountain disappear? How does a storm fall silent? There is no funeral, no banners, no soldiers carrying your name in song. Only the cave, only the echo of a breath that will not return. And yet your presence deepens, not fades. They come, not in crowds, but in ones and twos. Travelers, warriors, poets, peasants, a boy with a wooden sword, barefoot like you once were. A grizzled monk with calloused fingers who once saw you fight and never forgot the silence that followed. A woman who lost a brother in one of your duels, but still carries the story in her heart like an ember. They come not to mourn, but to feel, to sit where you sat, to listen to the cave breathe, to open the book of 5 rings and find their own reflection staring back at them between the lines. Because that's what you left behind. Not just a manuscript, not just a legend, but a mirror, one that refuses to flatter, one that demands you face it fully, without excuse. The ink you laid on scrolls outlives skin and bone. It winds its way into the hands of generals centuries later, into the hearts of business leaders in cities you never imagined, into the minds of lost souls with no swords but many battles. Each one in their own way stands in front of that mirror. Some turn away, a few remain. They ask, What would Musashi do? And the answer always is the same. He would walk forward, without fear, without need for praise, with his eyes open and his hands steady. He would not seek the fight, but he would not run from it. He would not cling to comfort or certainty or titles. He would master himself, because that was always the point, wasn't it? Not glory, not revenge, not even victory, but mastery. Even now your life is misremembered, twisted, exaggerated. They paint you as a demon, a god. A man who could split lightning in half or speak to ghosts. They say you never lost, that you sharpened your sword on fallen stars, that you could vanish in the mist, that you once defeated 20 men while yawning. You let them talk. Even in death you would have let them talk, because none of it matters. You never cared for titles. You never asked to be feared. You only asked to walk your path without lies. And that path, that impossible, merciless, beautiful path, it is still there. Worn now, but not forgotten. There are those who try to retrace your steps. They wear swords they do not understand. They dress like warriors, but carry no fire in their bellies. They think mastery is in the stance, the uniform, the scroll, but they are only shadows. They forget the hunger, the nights without food, the frostbitten mornings, the bruises on your ribs that never fully healed. They forget the silence, the weight of victory, the ache of being alone for so long. You forget the sound of your own voice. No, the path cannot be copied. It must be walked the right way, the hard way. And there are some, a few, who understand, who do not seek to be like you, but to walk beside the truth that made you, who do not fear failure because they know the real enemy is not loss. It is stagnation. It is comfort. It is the death of striving. Those few you would have nodded to, quietly, approvingly, the way you once did after a good duel, when no words were needed, only breath and blood and the understanding that something real had passed between two souls. Time moves on. The world becomes louder, faster. Swords give way to machines. Duels give way to debates. But the battle remains, always. The same war between fear and clarity, between ego and discipline, between illusion and truth. The same war you fought, not with armies, but with yourself. And that is why you endure. Not because of the victories, but because of the questions you dared to ask. What does it mean to be strong? What is worth dying for? How do you master not the blade, but the hand that wields it? How do you master the mind that commands the hand? How do you walk alone and still remain whole? The answers were never simple. They were never written in ink or carved in stone. They were lived, one step at a time, through frostbitten mornings and moonlit duels, through the quiet drip of water in a cave where no one clapped, through the sting of losing your first tooth to a wooden sword swung by your father, through the fire that never left your chest, even when your legs grew weak. This is your legacy, not the blade, the questions, and perhaps that's why, even now, people still listen. They may never walk as far as you did. Most will not, but they carry a piece of the path in them, in a silent moment before a decision, in the breath before the leap, in the voice that whispers, "You already know what must be done." That voice is you, still walking, still watching, still waiting for those few who are ready to face themselves, with nothing but open eyes and a steady hand. Because you were never a man in search of battle. You were a man in search of truth. The centuries begin to forget your face, but not your name. It lingers, not just in history books or war scrolls, but in the silence between breaths when a fighter faces their fear. In the quiet before a decision is made. In the stillness of a brushstroke drawn with perfect intention. You are no longer flesh. You are no longer a man. You are principle. Somewhere, a young soldier reads your words by the flicker of candlelight. Not because he seeks war, but because he seeks to understand how to survive it. Somewhere else, a businesswoman bends over a desk with your teachings marked in the margins of a strategy brief, drawing lines between your wisdom and the chaos of modern conflict. Elsewhere still, a tired teacher tells a story of a boy who left home with no shoes, no master, no guide, and became a legend by walking without stopping. You are not their hero, you are their mirror, and mirrors, if stared into long enough, demand honesty. The legends swirl, some too grand to believe, others too strange not to. That you could stop a man's heart just by staring, that you once fought an entire school and left not a single corpse, only shattered pride, that you turned down gold from emperors because gold made a poor pillow, that in your final days you painted a hawk so real it refused to leave the paper. None of these tales bother you. They are only echoes. What mattered always lived in silence. They build statues in your name, cast you in bronze, paint you with swords drawn and eyes fierce, but always caught in a moment just before motion. Even frozen in metal, you seem ready to move again. The world changes. Languages evolve. Castles crumble into dust, and yet the core of your teaching survives every collapse. Be present, be aware, strike with purpose. Know yourself. These are truths that outlive empires. Some people read your Book of 5 Rings as a manual for war. Others see it as a guide for business. Some treat it as philosophy. Others, poetry. The truth is, it is all of these things, and none of them, because the book is not a map of your mind. It is an invitation into their own. You gave them tools, not answers. You taught them how to see. And still, the road you walked remains open, not just to those with swords, but to any who feel the pull to rise, to refine, to confront what lives in the deepest shadows of the self. You were never just teaching how to win a duel. You were teaching how to survive yourself, and in doing so, you became something no blade could ever cut down. A path, a choice, a voice in the dark that says, keep going. They come to Rei Gando still, the curious, the reverent, the desperate. They sit in the same cave where you wrote your truths and try to feel what you felt. Some come to find courage, others come to bury their fear. They sit where you once sat, look out at the same mountain wind. Some meditate, some cry, some draw swords against their own doubt, and when they leave, they do not carry your ghost. They carry themselves, sharper, lighter, truer, and in that you live again, not in their footsteps, but in their awakening. In a world that rarely sits still, you become the embodiment of stillness, not of inaction, but of control. That rare clarity found only in the hearts of those who have tested their limits and lived to understand what lies beyond them. Even those who do not know your name feel your influence. They speak your words without knowing their origin. They follow your discipline without tracing its source, and still, your lessons unfold like a scroll without end. There is something strange about how your teachings cross boundaries you never imagined. You knew nothing of skyscrapers or boardrooms, of satellites or circuits, and yet your philosophy remains unshaken. Because you never taught swordsmanship as a craft of death, you taught it as a language of truth. You understood that every life is a battlefield, even for those who never lift a blade. Every argument, every decision, every turning point, all require awareness, rhythm, timing, and most of all, presence. That is why your story endures, not because of how many men you bested, but because you offered something rarer, a way to live with intention. There are martial artists who study you obsessively. They memorize your movements, copy your stances, repeat your words, but the wisest of them know the truth, that your real power wasn't in how you stood, but why you stood. Not how you struck, but when. Not what you defeated, but what you refused to become. You turned your back on prestige, on comfort, on certainty. You chose the path that devoured the weak and tested the strong. And when it broke you, you remade yourself again, each time quieter, each time clearer, each time closer to that unknowable stillness you came to name void. In your final scroll, you wrote of that void. You described it not as emptiness, but as clarity beyond form, that place beyond fear, beyond desire, where no technique survives and no thought remains, only awareness, stripped of self. You are not chasing victory anymore. You are chasing disappearance. But even as you dissolved into that stillness, the world remembered. A man carves your name into a sword blade he gifts to his son. A general reads your scroll before a campaign and folds it into his coat. A young woman, uncertain of her strength, memorizes a single line from your teachings and uses it to stand her ground when everything else in her life falls apart. And so your spirit walks with them, not as a ghost, but as a choice. The choice to live deliberately, to fight not for dominance but for understanding, to walk alone and remain whole. That was the legacy you left behind. And though your bones have long returned to dust, your blade has never dulled. Because the sharpest blade you ever forged was not made of steel. It was your mind, and it still cuts clean through the noise of this world. Your name outlives the men who feared you. The halls you once walked are gone now, their paper walls turned to ash and dust. The scrolls they wrote about you faded, rewritten, revised. But your story, the real story, not of blades but of becoming, still finds a place in the minds of those who crave more than safety. You became the voice of discipline in a world desperate for comfort, the steady rhythm in a world that rushes. When people stumble, they look for rules. But when they awaken, they look for you. Because you never offered rules. You offered responsibility. The students who visit the cave do not come for ceremony. They come to sit in the silence you once inhabited, to breathe in the cold air and wonder, what did he feel here? What did he know that I do not? And in that wondering, they grow. They come with different questions now, not how do I win, but how do I choose, not how do I defeat others, but how do I live in alignment with myself. Your presence is in the questions, not just among swordsmen or warriors, but among artists, monks, entrepreneurs, musicians, rebels, all those who live on the edge of tradition, who walk the knife's path between chaos and order. You are the patron saint of those who do not fit into clean boxes. Because you never did. You created a world where the battlefield and the scroll were not enemies, but reflections. You taught that form was only the beginning, a scaffold for the spirit to climb and then abandon. That every technique must be tested against truth, and truth is often brutal. Even now, those who read your book do not read it once. They read it again and again, because it changes as they do. What seemed simple becomes profound. What once felt harsh reveals itself to be mercy. It is a book that does not teach you what to think. It teaches you how to become. In a world that clings to noise, your silence is a roar. Your philosophy, the rhythm of it, the structure, is like swordplay itself. Direct, efficient, and rooted in something deeper than performance. You understood what so few ever do, that mastery is not cumulative, it is subtractive. It is what remains after illusion is burned away. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when a reader stares at a line from your scroll and feels, just for a second, as if you are looking back at them, not as a ghost, not as a hero, but as a man who once sat by a fire and asked himself the same terrifying question, am I living true? You never answered it with words, you answered it with a life. You lived in mud, in mountains, in moonlight. You carved your wisdom into trees before carving it into scrolls. You wore your failure openly, your doubt honestly, and your victory with silence. And in doing so, you built a path that cannot be followed, only discovered. This is what the world still doesn't understand, that your greatness was not in your invincibility, it was in your clarity. You knew when to fight, you knew when not to. You knew that a man's true enemy is not the one across the field, it is the one inside the mirror, and you faced him every day. It's strange how little remains of you physically. No grand mausoleum, no towering shrine. No carved throne to mark your passing. Just stone, just wind, just words. And yet, your absence carries a weight heavier than monuments, because monuments are built to remind people of what they've forgotten. You, Musashi, you are remembered without being spoken, felt without being named. There are those who chase mastery in your image. They build dojos with your portrait hung high. They recite your lines before matches. They hold their breath in silence, trying to channel your spirit through ritual. But what they fail to see is this. You were not born from tradition. You rose by burning it. Not out of disrespect, but out of necessity. When tradition no longer served truth, you shed it like a snake sheds its skin. You bowed when it meant something. You fought when it didn't. You walked alone because the crowd, even when respectful, moved too slowly for the fire in your chest. And now, centuries later, that fire still burns. In the artist who throws away the rule book to create something no one has seen before. In the fighter who steps into the ring not to conquer others, but to discover his limits. In the quiet soul who rises before dawn each morning, sharpening her skill in solitude, not because anyone is watching, but because the practice itself is holy. They are all walking the path. Your path. The world has changed, but the struggle has not. We may trade swords for code, for contracts, for conversation, but the core remains. There is still fear to confront. There is still ego to unmake. There is still a war to wage against the part of ourselves that prefers comfort over clarity. You are not the solution. You are the mirror, and you never promised ease. You never promised reward. You offered only the truth. That to live well is to live with ruthless honesty. That to seek mastery is to walk alone more often than not. That to be strong is to be still in the face of chaos. And that the real victory is not in defeating others, but in becoming someone who no longer needs to. Your sword has long since rusted into the earth, but your silence remains sharp. That's why the cave still draws them. Not the curious, but the seekers, those who have tasted enough of the world to know that answers are rare, and that sometimes the only answer worth trusting is a question that will not leave you alone. They sit where you sat. They listen. And if they are lucky, they hear not your voice, but their own, clearer, steadier, ready. Somewhere, a boy picks up a wooden stick and calls it a sword. Not because he wants to hurt, but because something in him hungers to know what it means to be strong. Somewhere, a woman walks alone into an unfamiliar city, eyes clear, voice steady. She has read your words. Not memorized them, absorbed them. She doesn't quote you. She moves like you, unshaken, intentional, ready to speak only when speaking means something. Somewhere, a man sits across from his doubt at a table of silence and asks himself whether the life he's built is truly his. Whether he has mastered the world or merely escaped the battle inside. In each of them, your ghost stirs, not to haunt, but to remind. You are never here to be worshipped. You are here to teach. And the greatest lessons are those that do not shout. Your silence still instructs. In boardrooms where decisions are made under pressure. In dojos where new students fumble with forms. In artists' studios where every brushstroke is a question. In conversations between teacher and student, where the teacher pauses and lets the student answer from within. You are there in those pauses. You taught a generation of warriors that battle was not about killing, that winning was not always victory, that survival meant little if you emerged unchanged. The blade was never the point. It was a mirror, a scalpel, a test, and that test continues. A man in a crowded subway grips a railing and breathes through the storm of his own mind. He remembers a phrase, not yours directly, but inspired by it, about stillness, about not reacting to the chaos, about acting when the moment is ripe and not a second before. He doesn't know your name, but you changed him. Your philosophy traveled farther than your body ever did. You never crossed oceans in life, but now your words have circled the globe 1,000 times. Translated, quoted, misunderstood, glorified, but always alive. And yet if you were to return, not as a spirit, not as a legend, but as a man walking the earth once more, you would not seek temples raised in your name. You would seek questions in the eyes of strangers. You would test your edge again, not against their swords, but against their truth. You would ask, do you walk your path? And most could not answer. But the few who could, they would not need to speak. They would nod. You would nod in return. No banners, no rank, no applause, only recognition. The same kind of recognition that once passed between you and Sasaki Kojiro in that final moment, before blades crossed, before blood fell, before time split into before and after. That look of two men who knew they had reached the edge of their own potential, and that only one would return from it. That look lives on, in anyone who dares to climb the mountain of their own soul, knowing they may fall, and climbing anyway. You are not the summit. You are the wind that dares them upward. The path you carved through this world left no footprints, but its shape remains in the soil. Time has not erased you. It has only softened the edges, turned your story into something that slips between myth and memory. But beneath the flourishes, beyond the legends that paint you as something other than flesh and breath, the truth still waits. Silent, disciplined, eternal. You were never just a warrior. You are a question in motion, and the world keeps answering you. In the dojo, a teacher stands before his students, not with pride, but with humility. He speaks your name, not as a boast, but as a reminder. That perfection cannot be gifted. It must be earned, step by step, failure by failure, breath by breath. In the boardroom, a woman sits at the edge of a decision. Her heart races, but her mind is still. She's read your words 100 times, and today she doesn't quote them. She lives them. She sees her opponents not as enemies, but as puzzles. She doesn't flinch. She acts, and the room, unknowingly, bends toward her clarity. On a mountaintop, a wanderer camps alone beneath a sky painted in stars. They have no destination, only a direction. They carry no map, only intent. They have left the noise behind. They walk slowly now, not from fatigue, but from reverence. Each step is a meditation. And though they speak no name, their walk is your walk. Even in places where your name is unknown, your way is known. Because it is not about Japan, it is not about swords, it is about presence, about breathing fully in the midst of chaos, about choosing mastery when ease is offered, about doing the hard thing not because it will be admired, but because it is right, and that is why you are not gone. Your story is not a closed book. It is a question whispered through every generation. Will you walk the path, even when no one watches? Those who say yes, quietly, steadily, honestly, they become your descendants. Not by blood, by discipline. The path remains brutal. You never promised otherwise. It will break the ones who come to it seeking glory. It will burn the ones who come seeking shortcuts. But those who come with open eyes and empty hands, those who come not to take, but to become, they will find what you found. Not victory, not fame, but self. Sharpened like a blade. Ground down until all that is false falls away, and what remains is real, indestructible, unmistakable, alive. Some truths arrive like lightning, sudden, bright, impossible to ignore. But others arrive slowly, like the turning of a stone in the riverbed, worn smooth not by force, but by time. You were one of the latter. To those who only look at your duels, your victories, your reputation, you appear as a storm, a blade that never missed, a force that could not be stopped. But to those who really look, who sit with your words, who feel the stillness you left behind, you are something gentler, not soft, but steady. You taught that clarity is the rarest form of strength, the world that praises noise, movement, speed. You defied it with silence, patience, precision. You walked slowly when others ran. You watched when others reacted. You trained when others slept. You chose the lonely road not because it was noble, but because it was honest. And honesty, you knew, was the only soil in which mastery could grow. Even now, your name exists in two forms. There is the Musashi they write books about, the man who fought over 60 duels and never lost, who carved oars into weapons, who wore rags and defeated lords. And then there is the Musashi, who sits in the quiet, who holds a brush instead of a blade, who meditates under falling leaves, feeling the breath of the earth in his chest. This is the Musashi they rarely speak of. But he is the one that matters most, because anyone can mimic violence. But to carry silence in the heart of conflict, that is rare. To win without needing to crush, to strike without needing to destroy, to walk away when pride begs you to stay. These are the marks of mastery no crowd will ever cheer for. But they are the victories that last. Somewhere, a girl reads your scroll in the corner of a quiet library. She's young. She has never held a sword. But she sees something in your words that no teacher has given her. Permission to be strong without apology. Not loud, not cruel, but clear. She folds the page, walks out into a world that tries to make her small, and she does not shrink. Somewhere else, a dying man writes his final letter. He is not famous. He has no legacy. But he ends the page with a line from your void scroll, not copied, but remembered. It steadies his hand. It quiets his heart. He smiles. This is how you live now, not as a statue, not as a story, but as a compass. For those who wander, for those who seek, for those who cannot explain why they wake each day with a fire in their chest that won't go out. You are the shape that fire takes. There is a moment, quiet and almost invisible, when a student becomes something more. It does not arrive with ceremony. No drumbeat. No sudden flash of realization. It arrives when the need for recognition disappears, when the sword is no longer drawn to prove worth, but to maintain balance. When the brush moves without hesitation, not to impress, but because the hand understands the weight of stillness. You lived in that moment. And long after your body fell still, that moment continues to awaken in others. Not as imitation, but as evolution. You never told others to follow your path. You only walked it with such relentless truth that those seeking their own couldn't help but notice. You weren't asking for students. You were inviting awakening. And awaken they did. Not all at once, not many, but enough. They came not with reverence, but with questions. What am I really fighting for? What do I stand for when no one is watching? What is mastery, if not the ability to walk away from the need to prove it? These questions you never answered directly. You gave no commandments, no codes. You handed them a mirror, the same mirror you faced in your cave, the same mirror that tested your worth more than any blade. It was never about the opponent. It was always about what the fight awakened in you, and once awakened, you never slept again. Even now, in a world filled with tools and toys you never imagined. Satellites, algorithms, the constant hum of information, your teachings still cut through the noise. Not because they are loud, but because they are true. A master of battle once, a master of mind always. This is why your name drifts across oceans, across centuries, carried in the hands of people who may never hold a katana, but who understand what it means to live on the edge of their own transformation. You showed them that to be disciplined is not to be rigid. To be free is not to be chaotic. To master the self is to know when to bend, when to hold, and when to disappear entirely. That's why your scrolls are still read, not as relics, but as revelations. They are not about history, they are about becoming, and those who are ready do not read them with their eyes. They read them with their breath, with the way they move through the world, with how they respond in the instant between pressure and decision. You trained yourself not for glory, but so that when the moment arrived, you would be ready. And now, those who study you do the same. They train not for applause, they train for readiness. For the moment that tests not what they know, but who they are. In every era, there are people who do not fit, they move differently. Speak less, see more. They are misread, misunderstood, sometimes even feared, but always, always, they are watching, testing, waiting for a truth that doesn't crumble beneath the weight of time. And when they find your story, they recognize it. Not because they've read about your duels, not because they know your victories, but because your silence sounds like theirs. They find you not in textbooks, but in moments, in the breath before action, in the decision to walk away from what is easy, in the refusal to perform when the world demands performance. You are not a myth to them. You're a language they've never heard spoken aloud, but have always known. A man who became a sword, not to cut others, but to slice through illusion. You are not their master, you are their reflection, and in that reflection they see something terrifying and liberating. That the true path is narrow, that it is quiet, that it is lonely, that no one will cheer you for taking it, but also that it is real. In the West, they adapt your teachings to other forms. They quote you in boardrooms, in training manuals, in books with glossy covers. Some distort you, some romanticize you. But a few, just a few, grasp the essence. That you are not writing about combat. You are writing about clarity, about the alignment of thought, movement, and intention. You are writing about how to move through a world that is always at war with truth, and how to emerge not hardened, but refined. And so your words become fire in the hands of those ready to be shaped. A young dancer reads your book of fire and understands for the first time that timing isn't just about steps. It's about listening, feeling, knowing exactly when the world is open and when it isn't. A chess master rereads your win scroll, and something shifts. He stops memorizing his opponents. He starts studying their spirit. He begins to win without moving pieces. A woman recovering from heartbreak copies your void scroll by hand. She doesn't know why, only that in the space between your words, she hears something she'd forgotten, her own voice. And in each of them, you live. Not as a shadow behind them, but as the still point within them, because your true gift wasn't your sword, it wasn't even your scrolls, it was your commitment to become fully yourself, no matter the cost. And that is a gift that doesn't expire. It multiplies, quietly, fiercely, forever.